I also want to thank the bishop's staff, particularly Lauren and Andrea Matella, who got this together, got everything organized so we could just come in and talk. And talk. You know, sometimes I feel like I'm a minister. I don't know. Okay. I also want to introduce our presenters today and thank them for everything that they've done to make this possible. Alex Shiflett did the PowerPoint you'll be seeing later. Francis Elmore and Dolores Miller. Come out here. Does everybody see them? They are infamous. We know they're infamous.
And who are you?
I'm Jane Lewis. Jane Hart Lewis. Yeah. They are infamous. But we would not be here if it were not for these two women. And I am profoundly grateful to them. And I'm going to take them. Okay. Before I get started, I'm going to give you a brief outline of what we're going to do. I'm going to give you a brief geography lesson because geography matters in our case. Matters a lot. Then we're each going to tell you a little bit about our story and how we got here. And then we're going to have a PowerPoint presentation. And y'all are so lucky because after that, you will be the beneficiaries of the first and only performance of an original song by our very own Dolores. Okay. So, that's where we are. Okay. First, there's the diocese. Y'all all know the diocese. You can't see. You know where you are.
You're right.
No, you know where you are, though. Because you're from Florence. He's lived in Florence. He used to scare me when I was a little girl.
He's still pretty slick.
He is. Here's the diocese. And here's the deanery of the diocese. Oh, we aren't supposed to say that. This is the Episcopal Church in South Carolina. Sorry. We're not so. The area that I'm going to be talking about is right up in the Florence Deanery. I wish I had a little pointer, but I don't. But there is about the upper 2/3 of the Florence Deanery. Okay? We're in a geographic area that is very poor. It's one of the poorest areas in the state. But it has had a very staunch Episcopal presence for years and years and years. And you're going to hear our story with this. Okay, so everybody has an idea of where we're talking about. Very agricultural, lots of small communities, 10, 15, 20 miles apart. We are attempting to serve with our worshiping group a 45-mile radius, trying to get people in a 45-mile radius. And here are the churches from which we're pulling, the ones that used to be Episcopal churches. They're on the blue dots. Okay? I hope that helps kind of let you know where we're coming from. All right. So it's my time to go. How am I doing with that? Okay, she's our timekeeper. All right, so I want you to know I am the product of the Episcopal Church. I don't know if that's good or bad, but I am the product of the Episcopal Church. I grew up at St. John's Episcopal Church. My great uncle was the Bishop of Philadelphia. My father was on the standing committee for many years. I thought everybody had bishops that came to their house frequently. Had their own priests that would come by and pray with you. I didn't know that didn't happen anywhere. I went to an Episcopal high school in Richmond, Virginia. That was my first residence. I got another time. Okay, that's good. an Episcopal high school in Richmond, Virginia, and then I went to undergraduate school at Solana. So when I say I am the product of the Episcopal Church, I am. Okay. After college, I moved around quite a bit. It ended up coming back to Florence, which is my home. I never belonged to another parish besides St. John's Episcopal Church in Florence. Even though I moved, this was the only church I had ever belonged to. Things had changed when I got back after 10 years of being away. Things had started to get more conservative. The parish that had led the fight for desegregation in the 50s and 60s had become much, much more conservative about any number of changes that were occurring in the Episcopal Church, while I had become much more liberal. Well, I became involved when I got back. Taught Sunday school, did children's chapel for years. And what I found, though, was that when I went to Sunday school myself, I didn't feel like I was welcome, would be the best way to say it. My opinions, my thoughts, my concerns were discounted. I was told that I couldn't believe what I believed and be a Christian. And so I felt that my home parish was no longer my spiritual home. Over time, this kept on. But the catalyst, of course, was about 10 years ago when Bishop Robinson was elected. The majority at St. John's had a decidedly negative response to this event, where mine was actually decidedly positive. After expressing my opinion to the parishioners at St. John's, I felt that my presence was anathema to the powers that be. It was very difficult for me to go to church, and so I pretty much stopped going, except for 3 times a year. Okay, I went at Christmas, Easter, and New Year's, because I am a good Episcopalian. However, when the Laurentians seceded from the Episcopal Church and the PD parishes followed suit, the lack of an Episcopal presence was anathema to me. So I called Dolores and Francis, and I said, I'm ready. We've got to have a church. And I asked to help. They included me, and I'm so grateful. So very grateful. We had an organizational meeting in November, and through the efforts of many, many people, we were able to provide what we call coffee and compline on December the 2nd, 2012, 4 hours after St. John's Episcopal Church decided to vote themselves out of the Episcopal Church. So, because of the efforts of so many, I am so personally happy to have found a spiritual home, a place where I am accepted once again, and so grateful to be there. There are always unintended consequences, though, of, we tried to think, well, let me put it this way, we tried to think of different scenarios that would come up and how we would handle this and how we would handle that. But we were completely taken off guard just a month or 2 ago. The ramifications of what the Laurentian actions did were really brought home to us when I received an email from Lauren Kiner on a Friday afternoon. I happened to be at happy hour with Alex. So I am a good Episcopalian. Saying that there was a gentleman from Tifton, Georgia, who was dying in a hospital in Anderson, South Carolina. And the undertaker, mortuary in Anderson, they had contacted to take care of James when when the time came, could not find an Episcopal church or an Episcopal priest in Florence. His family burial ground was in Florence, and that's where he wanted to be buried. What happened was they contacted their diocese. Where's the Bishop of Georgia? Great job. They contacted that office. That office contacted the Episcopal Church in South Carolina's office. And Lauren emailed me. This happened in a matter of just a few hours. We contacted our pastoral care committee. No, this is one person. And that person stayed in touch with his family until he passed away on a daily basis to see where we were. Lauren had arranged the services of an Episcopal priest from the Columbia area. Our group, when the time came, our group hopped together. And through the efforts of many people, including our wonderful altar gal, they made me say that. But they really are wonderful. This gentleman was buried in the place of his choice by an Episcopal priest with an Episcopal service.
And may I interrupt you?
I'll be.
That priest, I told the bishops earlier about a case of a priest who had been a long time priest in charge of a place and discovered that he didn't have a job when his salary was voted out of the budget. That's the priest.
So he came. So he was buried with an Episcopal priest and an Episcopal service, albeit out of a Lutheran church. I'm very grateful to have St. Catherine's Episcopal Church, a place where I feel fed and where I feel like I belong. And now you're going to hear from other people about their experience. Okay. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for calling our office. And we'll be back later for questions again.
Okay, well, I'm Alex, and I just want to take a brief minute of your time. And first of all, thank you so much for gathering today, everyone here. It really means a lot to us. And I would like to share two brief things with you, and I know that you appreciate the word brief today because you've heard a lot, but after I speak, we're going to hear from Francis and Dolores, and then we're going to have a little fun with a PowerPoint and a presentation. And I just want to say one thing about the PowerPoint. Feel free to giggle because there are places that are meant to be funny. Some are a little cheesy, but it's, hopefully it's meant to be funny. But I wanted to share my story briefly about when my husband Todd and I moved to Hartsville in 1998, and we joined St. Bartholomew's Episcopal Church because it was the only Episcopal church in Hartsville. And for a while things went well. We joined, we were active members, we gave to the church, we helped, and in October of 2000, our twins were born, Whitman and Grace, and they were baptized there. They grew up in that church, and we just went on with church life. Well, around 2003, my husband and I noticed that our church had started to change. Attitudes started to change, and things were being said, talked about, mentioned, whispered, that made Todd and I feel very uncomfortable. And these things were just downright prejudice. They were hateful, and they certainly were not Christian. And our first move was to pull ourselves and our children out of Sunday school. because we did not want our children growing up hearing these things. And when Whitman and Grace were old enough to join the service, we noticed the services started to change and things were being said in the services that we did not agree with, we felt uncomfortable with, and we certainly did not want our children hearing them. So we left the church. For about a year, we left the church. And this is the interesting thing. After about a year, our children said, "Why aren't we going to church?" And we had a long talk with them, and we explained to them why we were no longer members of St. Bartholomew's, what was going on, why we disagreed, and, you know, to our surprise, they agreed with us at the ripe age of 11. And so I knew then that we needed to find a church. And so I started digging, and when I started going online and really digging, I found out via news and email that Mark Lawrence had left the church, St. Bartholomew's, and Michael Ridgewell had taken our church, didn't ask anybody, just did it. And then he, as I said, he made this decision, which made me even more determined that I was going to find an Episcopal church for my family, because that's who we are and that's how we wanted our children to be raised. And it was by some miracle that me digging online, I found Bishop Catherine, and I sent her an email and I told her my story about my family and the church and how I didn't want to leave the Episcopal church. And bless her heart, she emailed me back and she said, "You do not have to leave the Episcopal church." And she sent me a wonderful email, and that led to me finding the group in Florence, which was the Florence Deanery and then PD. And the first meeting I went to, it was the home of Jane and Donald Lewis, and I found out about the meeting. I went to their home. I did not know a single person in the room. I did not know anyone, but once I was there, I found out we were all on the same page. And then I knew that this was a time for change and that things were going to happen, and we had to start this church. And so I showed up, and then my family started showing up, and before we knew it, we became this little family. And we've worked together, and they have been wonderful. They have made me, my husband, and my children feel at home. And they have even, my children, Whitman and Grace, are the only two children in our church. And even though everyone's doted on them and tried to make them feel special, if you can remember back to when you were 12 years old and thinking about looking around and being the only two children in a church, it's really hard on them. And we had a little discussion about that, and I just talked to my daughter. My son is at Canuga. Praise the Lord for Canuga. He's there. But this does have a happy ending. I talked to my daughter the other day because they're getting ready to go through confirmation. And it really bothers her that there are no other children. And I said, "Grace, would you like to go back to St. Bartholomew's?" And without hesitation, she said, "No. St. Catherine's is our church now." And she's 12. So I just wanted to share my story, and I just wanted to say, in the words of Kevin Costner from the famous movie, Field of Dreams. If we build it, they will come. And I am hoping and praying that as we continue to build St. Catherine's, that they will come. And thank you guys so much for listening to us today. Now I will turn it over to Francis and Dolores.
Sit, stay. Good boy. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dolores Miller. We're running 5 minutes behind, I'm told. And I'm an alcoholic. And I share my story with the next speaker, Francis Elmore, also from Florence. Together, Dr. Elmore and I represent approximately 100 years as members of our former parish. Now, I was hoping for murmurs. I thought it would be murmurs of, oh no. However, moving on. Having served our parish as adult Sunday school teachers, members of the vestry, junior and senior warden, and ECW president, as well as members of various diocesan committees and commissions, in 1995, it was assumed that we were bright enough to start the parish's first altar guild. They were wrong. We knew something about it, but not much. Sadly, we found that there was little information available to us in the way of informed guidance or direction, no manuals or reference books about altar guild ministry in our parish, and none in the diocesan library. No diocesan altar guild to provide assistance and repeated requests to the dean of the cathedral and other leadership for a cathedral day at which all of the altar guild workers would be invited for workshops and worship together to celebrate their common ministry, was met with overwhelming silence. It was in 1998, and quite by accident, that we discovered Province 4 and Province 4 Altar Guild, which had been formed in the mid-1970s and had met annually at Canoga Camp and Conference Center in Hendersonville, North Carolina, yet remained unknown and unmentioned in the way of altar guild in this diocese. Discovery of the Province 4 Altar Guild for us meant that the altar guild ministry took a decided turn for the better. It was at Province 4 Altar Guild meetings that we learned that there was a lot more to altar service than polishing silver, arranging flowers, or ironing. Along with learning to sing, pray, laugh, and worship together, we were introduced to such basic topics as the importance of inventories for insurance purposes, if nothing else, preventive maintenance, and disaster preparedness. Therefore, I cannot ignore this opportunity to express the appreciation of a lot of friends in Province 4 that we have made for the continued support of this group, the Province 4 bishops. And we do thank you, and we are grateful for your help. There was much more, but for sure. The annual Province 4 meetings led naturally to knowing about the National Altar Guild Association, or NAGA as it's called, which brings us to an article published in NAGA's winter issue and appeared in its quarterly publication. May I read it, please? I wrote it, so I better read it. As Episcopal parishes elsewhere in the nation prepared for the 2012 Advent season, those living in the Diocese of South Carolina were presented with an unwanted challenge when their diocesan bishop and standing committee declared ties with the Episcopal Church had been severed. As longtime members of Province 4 Altar Guild and National Altar Guild Association, Francis Elmore and Dolores Miller of Florence, South Carolina, have sat through their share of workshops about natural disasters and the damages they can inflict on parish sacristies. But what if the disaster is man-made? No piles of storm-tossed linens to launder, no missing or dented silvers for which to search or have repaired, just nothing. You leave with nothing, nothing at all, to prepare a liturgical church altar for communion. That was a dilemma facing the hastily formed continuing Episcopalians in the Florence deanery shortly before Christmas, unwilling to impose further on the hospitality of the Cross and Crown Lutheran Church by asking to use their equipment or supplies. It was agreed at a meeting of the group steering committee that they would simply have to do it the Episcopal way. First to volunteer help was an elderly widow who offered to bake her first Eucharistic bread, harder than a rock. I've seen grown men cry. Then the steering committee chair came up with a treasured family heirloom, a beautifully engraved silver goblet, and suddenly we had a chalice. Another trip to her storage closet produced a silver bread and butter plate, ideal as a patent. A couple of young couple present offered to donate the wine. Others offered to check out the linens that their mothers and grandmothers had passed along to them. And not long after that meeting, dainty linen cocktail napkins were being rinsed in icy water and re-ironed and folded into purificators, while the large white dinner napkins were also received similar treatment and became a 9-folded square corporal or a lavabo towel in 6-fold rectangle. Two antique cut glass perfume bottles became cruets for wine, while a small silver and cut crystal bowl became the lavabo bowl. Then the impossible happened. Out of the blue, from an Episcopal Church support group in Fort Worth, Texas, arrived a lovely Normandy silk damask burst and matching veil in the appropriate purple for Advent, which went surprisingly well with the Lutherans' luxurious navy hangings, also a liturgical choice of the Advent. With all things in place on the credence table and altar, our first Holy Eucharist as a group unfolded under the guidance of a supplied priest from a small parish in another deanery, and with glorious music provided by our former church organist and the soaring soprano voice of a talented young volunteer. It was a service to remember. Now that concludes the article, but not my story. I don't hear the buzz yet. No, I still have to.
The buzz has already gone off.
I still have to. All right. I still have to explain the presence of my young friend here. Good boy. Our previous sacristy was a 2-room sacristy lighted by stained glass windows, luxuriously lined with counter-spaced drawers, closets, hanging, and it opened directly into the chancel. And so we were just mere feet away from the altar. Nowadays, what we do is we pack this little baby full of our patent chalice. Everything is wrapped up carefully. We even have extra host wafer extra people's wafers. We pack it to its gullet, and we call this, this is our getaway sacristy.